when my parents invited my wife and me over for dinner, I actually thought things were turning around. It was a Wednesday. Out of nowhere, I got a text from my mom, "Would love to have you and Paige for dinner this weekend." Just us. Simple. No emojis. No guilt tripping. Just an invitation. It was the first time in 8 years they'd asked Paige to join us at their home. That alone should have been a red flag. I'm Ryan. 33. Oldest son. The kid who raised himself while his parents built a business empire. My younger sister, Chloe, now 25, is the sun around which my family's universe spins. Blonde, photogenic, charming, and entirely unaware of the world beyond her reflection. My parents have adored her since day one, and tolerated me as a technicality. Still, some part of me hoped this dinner meant progress. Maybe, just maybe, they wanted to reconnect. Maybe they were ready to see me as more than the background character in Chloe's highlight reel. We showed up with a bottle of wine. Paige looked perfect, always does. My mom hugged her like she was meeting her for the first time. Dad asked how business was going. We talked about nothing and everything for almost an hour, like a normal family. I started to relax. Then my mom said, "There's actually something we wanted to talk to you about." And just like that, they handed me a printed invoice for $110,238.34. Chloe's wedding. They wanted me to pay for it. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one, know this, you are not alone. Thank you for being here. If this hit home, drop a 1 in the comments. I read every one. Like, subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to find their voice too. Let's rewrite the narrative, together. They say every family has a favorite. In mine, there was never a debate. Growing up in San Diego, my parents lived in glass, the kind of sleek, modern house with more marble than warmth. They owned a chain of high-end cosmetic clinics, and from what I could tell, they cared more about brand image than birthdays. Conversations at the dinner table, when they happened at all, revolved around profit margins, celebrity clientele, and which influencer was coming in for Botox. I learned early on that vulnerability, emotions, even curiosity, those things didn't belong in our house. Appearances did. I was a quiet kid. I loved puzzles and astronomy and asking questions that made my teachers pause and say, "Huh, good one." At home, though, my questions barely earned a glance. If I showed them a drawing or a science project, my mom would nod absently while skimming through skincare invoices. My dad once said, "You think too much," and I remember wondering if that was supposed to be a compliment. It wasn't. I remember my 10th birthday clearly. I waited in my room with a plastic crown I'd made out of construction paper, thinking we'd go out for dinner like we did for Chloe. My parents didn't come home until 9 p.m. They'd forgotten. When my mom saw the crown on my head, she said, "Oh, honey, we'll do something next weekend, okay?" She never did. It didn't get better with age. At my high school graduation, I scanned the crowd from the stage and saw 2 empty seats where their names were printed. They were in Paris that week, work emergency. But I saw photos of their champagne brunch on Instagram. My grandma clapped louder than anyone, and I remember thinking, this is who loves me. Then came Chloe. She was born when I was 8. Golden hair, big blue eyes, straight out of a parenting catalog. My parents suddenly found time to attend recitals and host themed birthday parties. They doted on her like she was royalty, and in their world, she was. They dressed her in designer clothes before she could walk, posted her ballet videos like she was the next Baryshnikov. "She's the face of our family," my dad once said at a business mixer. I was standing right there. No one blinked. Chloe had a natural charm, the kind that lights up a room and makes people forgive anything. She'd fail a math test and my parents would laugh it off. "She's a creative." I got a B+ in calculus once, and my dad asked if I was losing focus. By the time I was in college, I'd stopped trying to win them over. Their affection wasn't a prize I could earn, it was a currency reserved only for Chloe. And honestly, that realization hurt less than the years I spent hoping. So I made a quiet vow to myself. I'd build a life that made me proud, with or without them. I'd chase my own version of success, not for their applause, but so I could look in the mirror and know I did it on my own. I didn't need their love anymore. But I did want something they could never fake: respect. And one day, I was going to earn it. Whether they were watching or not. Boston was a breath of clean, sharp air. It didn't care who my parents were, or what my last name meant in San Diego. It just wanted to know if I could do the work. I could. I put myself through college with scholarships, summer internships, and the kind of grind that leaves you both exhausted and strangely proud. While my classmates went bar hopping, I was writing code and building apps for local startups. That's how I landed my first job, consulting for a mid-sized tech firm that grew faster than anyone expected. Within 4 years, I was leading digital transformation projects for Fortune 500 clients, earning more in bonuses than my dad thought I'd make in a decade. That's also where I met Paige. She worked in the fashion department of a lifestyle brand our firm was digitizing. Paige had this fire in her, sharp, elegant, and unbothered by pretense. Where I was measured, she was bold. She challenged me. Loved me without needing to fix me. And for the first time in my life, someone didn't want me to perform or prove myself, they just wanted me. We moved in together after a year. Got married the next spring. I wore a charcoal suit. She wore white and gold and a smile that made everything quiet. Meanwhile, Chloe was living a very different story. She barely made it through high school, failed out of community college twice, and never held a job longer than a month. But none of that mattered. Our parents gave her a fancy title at their company, Director of Brand Strategy, and told everyone how brilliant she was at managing creatives. What she actually did was show up late, gossip, and throw fits when someone questioned her authority. I heard from an old friend who worked there that people walked on eggshells around her, terrified of saying the wrong thing. She screamed at interns, cried during meetings, and once locked herself in the conference room because someone suggested a rebrand. Instead of discipline, my parents showered her with sympathy. She's sensitive, my mom would say, like that excused everything. She's just passionate. When I got promoted, my father said, "That's great, son. But don't forget, family always comes first." Meaning Chloe. Meaning don't overshadow her. It was like we were living in two completely different realities, me in the real world, building something out of sweat and skill, Chloe in a bubble, protected from consequences and convinced of her own brilliance. She lived in a luxury apartment our parents paid for. I bought a condo with Paige using our savings and a loan. Chloe drove a leased Audi. I took the train. But if you looked at our family's social media, you'd think Chloe had invented electricity. They never posted about me. Not once. And that was fine, because I had something none of them could manufacture or fake. A life I built with my own hands. The wine glasses were nearly empty when my dad cleared his throat and leaned back in his chair, folding his napkin slowly like he was prepping for a business pitch. Paige and I exchanged a glance. Something was coming. "So," he began, too casually. "Chloe's wedding is shaping up to be a bit more expensive than we expected. Here it comes." "She's always dreamed of a destination wedding," my mom added, her voice syrupy sweet. "Maui. You know, the usual, beach ceremony, private villa, string quartet, custom lighting, floral arches, the works." I nodded, sipping slowly, letting the silence hang. I didn't say anything because I already knew where this was headed. My dad rubbed the back of his neck. "Truth is, we've hit some bumps financially. A couple lawsuits from disgruntled clients, legal fees piling up. And now, with the company restructuring." He looked at me like he was about to ask for a kidney. "We were hoping," he said, pausing just long enough to be theatrical, "you might step in. Just for the wedding. Help out. It'd mean a lot." I didn't move. Paige stiffened beside me. "You want us to pay for Chloe's wedding?" she asked, not bothering to soften the edge in her voice. "We wouldn't ask if it wasn't urgent," my mom said quickly. "She'll be devastated otherwise." And this family's reputation. That word made me laugh. Reputation. I reached out, took the neatly folded sheet of paper from the table, an actual itemized invoice, like I was a client. $110,238.34. I stared at it for a second. Then, I looked up. "I'll do it," I said. Paige's head whipped toward me. "Ryan." I gently placed my hand over hers. "But I have two conditions." My mom blinked. "Anything, sweetheart." "I designed the entire wedding. Every detail. No interference." They nodded too quickly. "And I give a speech at the reception." There was a pause. My dad squinted. "A speech?" "Yes," I said. "It's time I said a few things." They agreed, too desperate to question it. But inside, something in me was already shifting. Not out of spite. Not revenge. Control. For once, I was going to write the script. And everyone would be there to hear it. The moment Chloe saw the mood board, her nose scrunched like she'd just smelled something sour. "Wait, this is it," she said, flipping through the printed pages of ivory linens, understated floral arrangements, and a beachfront ceremony with no chandelier or monogrammed ice sculpture in sight. "Where's the champagne wall? The drone fireworks? You don't even have a live harpist on here." I smiled without looking up from my coffee. "Minimalist elegance. It's very in right now." Chloe scoffed. "It's very cheap, you mean?" Our parents stayed silent, awkwardly shifting in their seats. They didn't dare challenge me, not now. I was footing the bill, and they knew it. Still, it killed them to watch their fantasy wedding slowly take the shape of my design instead of Chloe's Pinterest board come to life. Paige backed me every step of the way. She said the understated aesthetic was refreshing. Sophisticated. Timeless. Chloe, on the other hand, treated every decision like a personal betrayal. She threw tantrums over flower types, accused the caterer of being too rustic, and cried when I told her there'd be no over-the-top TikTok photo booth. But I never budged. Because this wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a stage. And I was building it, plank by plank. Ethan, Chloe's fiancé, barely participated. Every meeting, he sat back scrolling on his phone, nodding at whatever Chloe said, even when she was clearly spiraling. He didn't care about colors, food, guest lists, nothing. He showed up late. Left early. When I asked him a simple question about the vows, he blinked and said, "She's handling all that." That would have been fine, except for the way he looked at Paige, like he knew her, or wanted to. Paige noticed first. The way his eyes lingered. How he complimented her outfits with too much familiarity. "Something's off about him," she said one night as we prepped the seating chart. "He doesn't look at Chloe like a guy in love." I shrugged. "Maybe he's just emotionally constipated." "No," she said, firm. "He's hiding something." I trusted Paige's gut. Always had. So I called a contact, someone I'd worked with years ago during a fraud audit. He'd gone private. Clean, discreet, efficient. "Dig around," I told him. "Just Ethan. I want to know if he's who he says he is." He didn't ask questions. Just said, "Give me a week." And suddenly, there was more to this wedding than speeches and centerpieces. There was truth waiting to be uncovered. The report landed in my inbox 3 days before the wedding. PDF. Password protected. Clean. Clinical. Every page felt like a punch. Photos of Ethan stepping out of an apartment in Silver Lake, LA, arm around a woman with dark hair and a smile that didn't seem borrowed. Time-stamped messages. Hotel receipts. Dinner reservations under a fake name. One screenshot showed a message he'd sent just last week, "Don't worry, the wedding's just for the money. A few more days and we're out." I closed the laptop and stared at the wall. Not for Chloe. Not for love. For leverage. I drove to my parents' house that evening. Chloe was alone in the backyard, sitting by the pool in a satin robe, scrolling through her phone. Her hair was pinned up like she'd just come from a trial run with the stylist. She looked up, irritated. "Do we really need to go over the chairs again, Ryan?" "No," I said. "We need to talk about Ethan." Her smile dropped. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us, screen facing her. The evidence was already loaded. I didn't say anything. Just hit play. The photos scrolled automatically, one by one. Her hand trembled as she reached out and paused on the one where he was kissing the other woman in front of her building. She didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. She just folded. Her whole body collapsed inward like a tent in the wind. She clutched her face and started sobbing, deep, heavy sounds like she'd been holding them in for years. "I knew," she choked out. "I knew. She looked up, mascara running. "I thought if the wedding was big enough, if it looked perfect, maybe they'd finally see me the way they see him." My chest tightened. "I didn't care if he loved me," she whispered. "I just wanted to matter again." She looked so small in that moment. Not the golden child. Not the spoiled brat. Just a girl who'd been raised to believe love was conditional. And now, the whole illusion was crumbling around her. The ocean was glowing. Sunset dripped gold across the horizon, and everything looked like a dream, just the way Chloe wanted. White chairs in perfect rows. Strings of fairy lights swaying gently in the breeze. A 6-tier cake that shimmered under the canopy. 200 guests dressed like they were walking a red carpet, wine glasses in hand, cameras at the ready. No one knew what had happened behind the scenes, not yet. Chloe looked stunning, as always. You'd never guess she'd cried herself to sleep 2 nights ago. She held herself together with spine and mascara. Ethan stood next to her like a prop, smiling on cue, saying the right things. If he was nervous, he didn't show it. I debated whether to expose him. But this wasn't about him anymore. It was about the truth. As the final toast was announced, the DJ's voice called me up. "Now, a few words from the brother of the bride. Ryan." I walked slowly toward the mic. The sea hummed in the background, and the whispers quieted. I took a deep breath and looked around the crowd, our family, our parents' business partners, their curated community of friends. First of all, I began, "I want to thank my parents. For everything they've taught me." Polite laughter. My mother smiled tightly. "They taught me how to stand on my own. How to live without applause. How to build a life when no one hands you a map or even looks your way." The crowd shifted. A few people raised eyebrows. I was the firstborn. Which meant I got the test version of parenting. I don't remember bedtime stories or packed lunches. I remember silence. Tutors. Nannies. An empty seat at graduation. My mother's smile cracked. My father frowned. When Chloe came along, everything changed. They finally found the child they wanted to show off. And I mean that literally, photo shoots, gala events, ballet recitals with VIP seating. She became the star. And I became the shadow. The audience was dead silent now. But I'm not bitter. Not anymore. Because being invisible taught me how to build in peace. I learned how to survive, then succeed, not because of them, but in spite of them. I paused, then turned to Chloe. And Chloe. I know things didn't go the way you imagined. But you showed up. You faced the truth. That takes strength. More than they ever gave either of us credit for. She blinked, lips pressed together, eyes glistening. This wedding, this stage, I didn't build it for revenge. I built it because I needed one moment. Just one. Where I could stand here and say, I'm not the failure. I'm not the afterthought. I'm the man I am because I was left alone. I stepped back from the mic. No dramatic mic drop. Just stillness. There was no applause. Just silence thick enough to choke on. I walked over to Chloe and gave her a soft hug. "I mean that," I said. And then Paige and I turned and walked away, leaving the speeches, the lights, and everything else behind us. I didn't need to stay for the cake. I'd finally said what needed to be said. By midnight, the party was over, in every sense. The guests had scattered. The dance floor, once packed, sat empty under flickering string lights. Someone had knocked over the cake. Ethan was gone. Not just from the venue, but from Chloe's life. He left a note in their suite. No signature, just a scribbled line. "You knew what this was." Chloe called me. I found her barefoot, still in her dress, sitting on the edge of the dock behind the venue. Her train trailed behind her like a ghost. She didn't look up when I sat next to her. "I canceled it," she said quietly. "Called the planner. Told her not to file the license." I nodded. "Good." Silence stretched between us, the waves lapping quietly beneath us like they were listening. "I thought he'd at least pretend," she said, voice hollow. "Stick around long enough to make it look real. He didn't even try." She turned to me, makeup streaked, hair undone, and for the first time in our lives, she looked human. Small. Real. "What do I do now?" she asked. I didn't give her a pep talk. Didn't sugarcoat it. I just looked her in the eyes and said, "You start over." Her lip trembled. And this time, I added, "You do it for you. Not for them. Not for their approval. Not for a headline. Just you." She nodded slowly, wiping her face with the edge of her sleeve. "I don't know how. We'll figure it out." And in that moment, for the first time ever, she wasn't just my sister. She was my equal. The video of my speech hit the internet the next morning. Someone had filmed it, a shaky clip posted by a distant cousin, captioned, "When the groom's brother burns the family alive at the altar." Within days, it went viral. Comments flooded in. People called it raw, honest, brutal, beautiful. Others shared their own stories of being the forgotten child, the outsider. Hashtags trended. Podcasts quoted me. Someone even did a dramatic reading on TikTok. But the fallout from my parents was swift and merciless. Clients pulled out. Partnerships dissolved. Employees quit. Their perfect family brand collapsed under the weight of the truth. They tried to spin it at first, damage control statements, blaming editing, misinterpretation. But the receipts were out there. People saw through it. My father released a formal statement, "We regret the embarrassment caused by our son's emotional outburst." Then he cut me out of the inheritance. Not that I expected anything, but the gesture was theatrical, like I'd betrayed them, not the other way around. A week later, Paige got a call. It was my mother. "We didn't know," she said, voice thin, shaky. "Tell Ryan we were wrong. Please." Paige didn't say much. Just listened. When she hung up, she looked at me. "What do you want to do?" I stared out the window for a long time. "Nothing," I said. And that was it. I'd waited my whole life for their approval. Now, I finally understood I didn't need it. Chloe moved into a small apartment 2 towns over. Nothing fancy, second-hand furniture, creaky floorboards, a view of a parking lot. But it was hers. She started therapy twice a week. She didn't talk about it much, just mentioned how weird it felt to say things out loud. Then one day, she said, "It's helping," and that was enough. A month later, she joined a nonprofit that worked with at-risk teens. Outreach, mentorship, some fundraising. She loved it. Said it gave her a reason to wake up without panic. She cut her hair. Stopped using filters. Started laughing with her whole face instead of posing for approval. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't post updates. But it shows up in little things, like finally seeing someone become who they were before the world told them who to be. 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, Chloe came over for dinner. Just me, Paige, and her. We ordered pizza. No fancy setup. No wine pairings or lighting design. Just takeout boxes, music in the background, and a couch full of pillows. Chloe told us about a kid she was mentoring, a 17-year-old with no filter and a heart too big for her circumstances. She talked with this light in her eyes I hadn't seen since we were kids. We joked. Ate too much. Paige spilled sauce on her shirt and didn't care. Chloe didn't apologize for anything the whole night. That might have been a first. At one point, she leaned back and smiled at us. Maybe, she said, it took a broken wedding to finally build something real. We clinked our glasses, water, soda, whatever was within reach. And for the first time in years, there was no tension. No performance. Just us. A brother. A sister. A new beginning. Not every family story ends with reconciliation. Some don't end at all, they just evolve. What I've learned is that silence doesn't protect you. It only buries you deeper in someone else's version of your life. For years, I stayed quiet because I thought that's what love looked like. Endure it. Swallow it. Be the bigger person. But love without respect isn't love. And family without truth is just performance. Speaking up didn't ruin our family. It revealed the cracks that were already there, the ones we painted over with designer vacations and forced smiles. And once the truth was out, there was space. Not just for healing, but for honesty. For boundaries. For actual connection. If I hadn't spoken that day, I'd still be playing the same role they assigned me, the quiet one, the shadow, the steady background. Now, I'm none of those things. I'm just myself. And for the first time, that's enough. So let me ask you this. If you were handed the mic at your own family's table, the one where you've sat, year after year, holding your tongue, what would you say? Would you whisper? Would you roar? Or would you finally let the silence end? Because sometimes, the moment you speak isn't when you lose them. It's when you find you. And that's when the story finally begins.